Hey everybody, welcome to week 6, dealing with portraits. I want to give you a little introduction to some of the photographers we're going to be looking at. So you've got Avedon, Pluton, Annie Leibovitz, and Martin Scholler in the next ebook. I pulled a bunch of interviews from all of them so you can really get a good sense as to who they are, what their styles are, and the kinds of images that they're making of people and why they're making pictures of people and images, photographs of people. I think that's, especially with Pluton, you really get into that sense. Same thing with Martin Scholler. Martin worked with Annie as her assistant for 3 years, so that's how he got his start. Richard Avedon is unfortunately no longer with us, but I think he is one of the just most influential portrait photographers in the last century. A couple other photographers I'm going to show you real quick. One is Steve McCurry. I think we're all familiar with Steve McCurry's work. This is a famous photograph of the Afghan girl. Beautiful, striking portraits. Did a lot of work in, let's see, getting some shimmer on there. Pakistan and Afghanistan in the 80s. His work is just really, just kind of really touches in, and he really finds kind of the essence of the person really in their eyes. So if you Google Steve McCurry, do an image search for his work, you're going to see a lot of really nice stuff there. One thing to consider with him is that he shot a lot of work on film. He's a prolific photographer in the 80s and the 90s, so a lot of his work was done on Kodachrome 64 and even 25. So if you want to look up great video, I'll put a link in here, but it's the last roll of Kodachrome. Awesome story about the final roll that Kodak produced. They gave it to Steve McCurry, and then he took it to the lab in Kansas that was the last lab to process it, and it was the very last lab that the lab processed ever. So kind of a cool story there. That film's got a beautiful warm tone to it that really, really does some nice stuff to these images. All right, Annie Leibovitz. Why do I like Annie Leibovitz? I just think she's, for a long time, for me, has just been one of my favorite photographers. Her work is so diverse. She's had just this, does fashion work. She can do photojournalism, documentary. She always comes back to, I just like taking photographs, and she's not super technical about her stuff. She does have big production value. She has really big crews that will do projects with her, but then she'll also do stuff solo. So really, and she's been photographing for just so long, and I think she is probably the quintessential female photographer, woman photographer. Her partner Susan Sontag, they were together for a long time. That was a very influential relationship on her work. One of my favorite photography books is just entitled Women, and she did it in the 90s, 80s and 90s, and it was all just portraits of women from all different walks of life. And for me, as a young photographer, I really enjoyed looking at that body of work. Another body of work of hers that I liked a lot is this Olympic Portraits. This came out probably in 98, 2000, somewhere in there. Beautiful portrait work of Olympic athletes, all in black and white. So again, I couldn't find anything online that really just sort of summed that up. But again, her style, it's really clear. It's stark, really powerful images of these athletes, and really clean. But she also uses things like a little bit of motion blur, like in this image here of the runner, to kind of accentuate how fast that person's going and accentuate the rhythm and the pacing. Jill Greenberg is one of my all-time favorites. If you've seen any Netflix movie poster, any Netflix promotional photography piece, Miss Greenberg is probably the one who has photographed that. This book here, she has two or three bodies of personal work. This one is End Times, and it's these portraits of babies crying. And they kind of hurt to look at, especially if you're a parent, you know exactly what that's like when it's the complete meltdown. And this here is a book of just meltdowns. Her personal work really kind of, it pushes on the edges. Her stuff is really, really well lit and very stylized. You can kind of feel, get that Netflix feel kind of in there, especially like Stranger Things kind of thing. So another one that she has is bear portraits, and then she also has monkey portraits, and I recommend both of those. So Jill Greenberg, we recommend looking at her work online also. Next up, Elliot Erwitt. You should look for his work online. Erwitt is Erwit. He might be one of the oldest photographers still alive. He's in his 90s, still making photographs. This book right here, you can get a sense of how thick it is. This is called Snaps, and awesome street photography, but a really good portrait photographer. Somebody who just really understands people and is just absolutely prolific about what he does. I think we all are familiar with that concept of, you've got to do something 10,000 times or put 10,000 hours in before you're really good at what you do. And when you see a book like this with this thickness, you get a sense of like, yeah, this guy's been around. I mean, I think we probably all have seen this photo at some time or another. All right, last but not least, I want to loop back into Richard Avedon. I have a copy of In the American West right here. This is probably one of my favorite portrait photography books of all time. I think this is just an amazing, amazing body of work, and it's been super influential and inspiring for me. I think I've gleaned a lot there. Avedon understands what the mask is, and he understands how to get his subjects to take it off and just be themselves and be incredibly raw and comfortable in front of the camera. And he does that by, often he would work with very large format cameras, have a very slow and methodical pacing to his work, and that allowed for just amazing photographs to be made. And so he was waiting for that moment. So this book here, you can see, is, I mean, it's oversized. All of these prints were made oversized for the expedition. It's really, really cool. So, I mean, every time I open this book up, I'm just like, oh, wow, that's something new and fresh in there. So I put a lot of links up of photographers for you guys to look at. And there's a lot of material there. So comb through it, find the stuff, get inside their heads, and start to understand what it is that makes them tick and what it is that they're doing. So I hope you enjoy that, and I'm looking forward to your portrait projects coming up soon.